Good. And what happens next is either you fulfill the promise that you made or you don't. Does that follow, that you make the promise and you either fulfill it or you don't? Yes, I'm saying some yeses. Some people are asleep. That's okay. But you make a promise based on the way that you operate. The things that you say, your past work history, the projects that you've delivered, everything that's coming out that people can figure out about you, you're making a promise to them about how they're going to feel and what they're going to get when they interact with you. And if you fulfill that promise, then they're willing to put you in a position to make another promise. And so think about this as you progress through the Drupal world. Are you making promises and then fulfilling them? Or are you, in some cases, making promises and you're unable to fulfill them? And I'm here to tell you that if you're consistently fulfilling your promises, you will have a much happier life than if you're consistently not fulfilling your promises. Sounds pretty basic. But when we give a customer a deadline, that's a promise. And if we consistently miss those deadlines, we're not going to be in a position to make them a promise again. Which is why it's so important to find the kind of people that you want to do business with that fit naturally with the way that you do business and to do more business with them. So I want to talk to you a little bit about this diagram. This is my idea. It's kind of a framework of how we figured out where we fit best at Veloci. Now, how many of you have heard of Veloci before I stood up here today? Good. All of my employees raised their hand. That's great. That's awesome. I'm so glad. So in the Drupal community, who's somebody that could tell me who Veloci is that doesn't actually work at Veloci?
Drupal company.
It's a Drupal company.
SEO.
SEO, good. Specializing in marketing, good. So what that means is that you are aware of our brand. You're aware of what it is that we go out in the market and we promise people that we are going to do. Now, what we have done is we've you know, I was blocking the slides the whole time, wasn't I? All right, so over here on the left, we've got what you're great at, the promises that you make, the messaging that you use to communicate those promises. We've got the specific outputs, right, which are the things that people can actually see. And then those all come together and converge on the different customer niches that are out there. Now, in this particular instance, this graphic represents customers, right? Now, in between these lines, this is what I'm calling a niche, a customer niche. And there are a lot of niches. And in fact, the niches, you see this line, it goes on forever. There's all different kinds of customers and places where you could be doing business. But here in this particular niche, you'll see a lot of the lines are converging. And a lot of the ways that you communicate and message and the ways that we communicated and messaged to our customers looked a lot like this. It was all over the map. And we were hitting our niche pretty well, or at least we thought we were. But in fact, the messages were not coherent, and they were not clear, and they were not all coming together in a really positive way. So what we did is we went back through, and we said, well, what is it what we're really great at? What do we do fantastically well? And we started to understand that a little bit better. Well, at Veloci, we're great at working with marketers. We're great at saving them lots of time. We're great at figuring out the business problem that they're trying to solve. We're great at driving traffic to their site. We're great at helping them turn that traffic into leads and paying customers. We have a lot of things that we're great at. But just understanding what we're great at was very helpful. And it actually led to us being consistent or more consistent with our messaging. And that flows to the bottom line. And so I would encourage you to figure out, what are you great at? And just by knowing what you're really, really good at is going to help you in that communication and in that messaging, and it's going to flow to your bottom line, whatever that is. The next thing that we did is we worked on our promise. So just because we're great at something doesn't necessarily mean that we're making a promise, a coherent promise. And so we worked on the promise that we make to our customers. If you hire Veloci, we're going to save you time, you're going to make more money, and you're going to look good doing it. That is our promise. What is the promise that you're making to your customers? I would encourage you to explore that. And it needs to be based on what you're really good at. Don't make a promise in things that you're not really good at. Hedge on those things. I get somebody else who can help me with that. Right? If you do that, it'll take away a lot of confusion. It'll take away a lot of the silos in your business or in your communication. And it'll make sure that every time somebody comes in contact with you or comes in contact with your company or your message or your brand, that they're hearing the same messages again and again. And that carries through to your customers, to your niche, and to the bottom line. The next thing is the actual messaging and the outputs. And I kind of group those together because messaging is a lot about what exactly you're saying. How do you wordsmith the words? What does the graphic look like? What does your website look like? What are the projects you're pushing out? And how you're saying those things, it's really, really, really important. But what you end up with, what you want to do is you want to find the best and highest need that you can meet, you can fulfill for that customer niche. And you want to make sure that all of your messaging, all of your focus, all of the promises that you make, all of the projects that you take on are focused in on the highest and best place that you can for that customer, right? And what you end up with and what you'll get is significant improvement to your bottom line. We call this the concentrating forces of all efforts. It means that every dollar that you spend on marketing or going to a Drupal camp, sitting here today for these hours, every time you put more effort into getting the message out about you or your business is cumulative to all the stuff you've done in the past. You think about it, it makes logical sense. If somebody meets you at DrupalCon and they get one promise, and then they read your Twitter feed and there's other stuff, and then they read your website and there's yet another message, and they look at your product or they talk to somebody who's received that product and there's another message, you have a very scattered communication strategy, and you're not appealing to the highest possible need that you can meet. So this is what we did at Veloci, but for personal people, we call this personal branding. Personal people, whatever. We call it personal branding, right? What is branding? Well, first of all, marketing is all of this stuff. Sometimes people say, well, what exactly do you mean by marketing? It's all of the stuff that you do. And it's really easy to confuse marketing and branding because they're very closely related. Branding is the tuning of all of these lines so that all of your marketing messages are pointed at the same place. That's what branding is. Marketing is what you do and how much of it you do. We could make these lines different sizes and thicknesses and stuff like that, but anyway, that's what branding is. Branding means that you're on message, and that when people hear of Veloci, they're going to say things like SEO and Drupal and the things that you guys shouted out. All right, so usually right about now, how are we doing on time? Okay, we're good. I've got a couple more minutes before I'm going to hand it off to Tim. Now, Tim and I actually got together, how long has it been now? 6 months ago, 8 months ago, for lunch. And we got to talking, and I actually have a directive to my assistant that whenever she schedules lunch with me and Tim, she's got to schedule it for at least 3 hours. Because whenever Tim and I get together for lunch, it lasts a really long time because we get into start talking about some of this stuff. He started telling me about a theory that he had about how to figure out what that highest possible need is that the customer has, and how to figure out how you can fulfill it. So I'm going to turn it over to him and have him explain that to you. But before I do you have any more questions about this slide?
Commentary?
If you like.
Can I disagree on branding? Just give
Sure.
a little, or actually do another facet of the diamond? Branding is actually what other people's perceptions are of you. So it's what all of the people in the audience,
Yep.
the result of your marketing.
That's exactly right. And that's what this tuning is. This is not what you say you are. This is what the customer receives. This is what the customer says you are. And actually, this is a very simplified version of a much more complex slide that I use at times. But because of time limitations today, I had to take out like the customer decision-making process. There's actually the reception of the inputs from the outputs, and the customer receives inputs, and then they apply their own filters. And then there's the preference that's built. And then there's what we call a preference point, which is actually at what point the customer, it's very complex, but I thought I'd just take all those things out. But very good point. Yes?
So if I could use a little guidance in creating the list that you call business activities, especially for a personal brand.
Sure.
Is it answering the question, I am very good at, or these are the activities that my business day includes? How does one generate the list in the first place?
Okay, the question was, how do you generate the list? And I'm assuming you don't mean this list of like activities. You mean like what you're best at?
Well, no, I guess maybe how those two lists create. So that if I was going to draw this diamond for myself as a personal brand, where do I start to come up with the first points that lead to the?
If you were gonna draw this as your personal brand, and I would say that what you're really good at needs to fit in really well with like the marketing outputs that you do, and those things have got to merge and combine. And there's no right answer for any one person, but what we did is we took a list of all the customers that we had over the previous 2 years at the time we did the activity, and then we rank ordered those customers by how successful and happy the customer was. And we actually have a methodology for figuring out how happy customers are. And we rank ordered them, and then we deleted the bottom 2/3 off the list, so that we only had a list of the customers that were the most happy. And then we went through and we researched each of those customers, and we asked probably 15 to 20 different questions about the companies and about the people that we were doing business with. And what that did, the happiness of the customer is based on their interactions with you. You can work really, 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 really hard and take a customer that's, just is not a natural fit, and you can make them happy. But you don't want that. What you want is somebody who's really easy to deal with and really easy to make them happy. That's not laziness. That's just an alignment of personalities. Anybody who's been in a difficult relationship can tell you, you can work really hard to make the other person happy, but it's much more fun to be in a relationship with somebody that you just naturally make them happy. So then you find those things that are the same in those companies. And then that's when you start to make, okay, these are the things that I must be really good at. And you can do that by asking them, by researching the company. And I would say that if you should only focus on things that you can know before you're in business with them, right? It doesn't do you any good to know that, you like this, or this particular characteristic is important, but you can only find that out after you deliver the project. That doesn't help you a lot. What you want are things that you can go online and look at a database, or you can even ask the customer, how do you guys do this? How do you do your billing? And would you prefer, do you like sprints, or do you like more of a waterfall approach, or whatever it is? And those are all valid and good questions, but you need to be able to find those things out first. And then your skills will start to fall out. You'll start to figure it out. But it's a process. You're going to go through it. Anyway, I'm going to turn it over to Tim.
All right, terrific. Thank you. The comment about branding, I think, was a really interesting one. It was a very good point that what you are, what is true inside of yourself as a company, an organization, or a person who's branding yourself is very different than what you're perceived to be. I could just use a personal example. I might consider myself shy or introverted, but other people experience that as maybe at times thoughtful or deliberate. And so perception is a really, really key question. And Abraham Maslow, how many of y'all are familiar with Abraham Maslow as a psychologist? So a pretty good portion of the room. He gave us a huge gift called the hierarchy of human needs. And it's a 5-tiered triangle or a pyramid, which essentially is an illustration or a model of what a typical human being, and what the needs of a typical human being are and how they evolve from bottom to top. And so if you start out at the bottom of the pyramid, as all of us do, your first and foremost priorities to meet your physiological needs. Things like water, air, food. Once you satisfy your base need of your physiological need, you start to graduate up the pyramid, and you focus then on your safety need, and all the way up to the top of the triangle. Next is community, right? Belonging to a community, love and belonging. And then once you do, you want to be esteemed and recognized within that community. And finally, at the top is self-actualization. A lot of different words are synonymous with this. Some people think of it as flow. Some people think of it as sort of like your zen. It's when all things in life align and your sort of point in life is in perfect alignment with where you want to go. And unfortunately, Maslow died before he was able to apply this to business, but that was his last effort. But luckily, Chip Conley picked it up where he left off. Chip Conley owns the largest chain of boutique, like privately held hotels in North America, in California. And he, in 2001, his business was in crisis with 9/11 and the dot-com boom and bust. And in a state of anxiety and despair, he went to Barnes & Noble, picked up Maslow's book on the hierarchy, and he started studying it. And what Chip came up with was the idea that there, in every business, in every organization, three stakeholders and audiences that you should be concerned with. In terms of tracking the pyramid, there are three different pyramids acting in every organization: employees, customers, and investors. And every single one in his book called Peak, every single one of them has a system of different needs, 5 different levels, which are fascinating to investigate. And what we're going to focus on is the customer triangle. So I won't talk about the other two today, but we'll focus on the customer triangle. And again, the objective of my part of the presentation is to get at the question of how customers perceive you and receive you and need to receive what your idea of what you're really great at. How do you want to message that to customers? And so Chip Conley said that if you're meeting the base level for customers in business, the safety and physiological needs of your customers, you're surviving. That's the survival level. Once you do that, you then, as a business, should focus on meeting the esteem needs and the love and belonging needs of your customers. So this is getting your customers to the success level. And the third and final level, at the very peak of the customer pyramid, is transformation. That's when your customers are in a state of self-actualization, if we refer to Maslow's label. So if you're doing this successfully for your customers, sorry, my slide transitions were a bit off there. So if you're doing this successfully for your customers at the base level, you're meeting your customers' expectations. Right? That's the survival level. You're meeting their expectations. If you go above the expectations and you're in the success tier, you're meeting their desires. And if you graduate to the very, very top and you're actually getting your customers into a state of self-actualization, you're meeting your customers' unrecognized needs. And there's some really compelling outcomes of these successes at the bottom. If you meet expectations, you're creating customer satisfaction. If you're meeting their desires, you're creating customer commitment. And at the top, if you're meeting unrecognized needs, you're creating evangelism within your customers. And so to make this a little more practical, I'll talk a bit about Joie de Vivre, which is Chip's hotel company. And we can talk a bit about specifically how he did this. So if we think in terms of a case study, how a hotel would meet the physiological needs of its guests. It would need to provide a clean and comfortable bed, for example. That's a way that a hotel could meet the physiological need of its customer, right? And one level above that is the safety need. And to do that, a hotel needs to provide well-lit parking, functional door locks, good, safe, secure security environment. And above that, if you're getting your customers to experience the love and belonging need and graduating above that, you need to provide a welcoming and responsive service. They need to feel at home even though they're a guest at the hotel. And finally, if you're looking to meet the esteem needs of your customers, you should focus, or Chip's model here is to focus on getting the customers to feel like a very important person as a guest at the hotel. And finally, the big challenging question was, how do you get a customer to feel in a state of self-actualization as a guest at a hotel? And what he came up with was that his customers would experience an identity refreshment, an affirmation of their identity that would reinforce themselves. And so that's a pretty lofty goal. And you could ask yourself, how could a hotel possibly deliver a customer refreshment? to its customers. And so what Chip did is, it's a really, really interesting idea. He took very polarizing magazines that have like a religious subscriber and follower base, and he researched and studied those magazines to identify five core attributes and personality traits. What made them so unique? And then he themed every single experience of a particular hotel after that magazine, in terms of interior decor, exterior decor, the food, whether or not the staff communicated with you in a formal or an informal manner, if they were irreverent with you, or the exact opposite side of the spectrum. And he did that for a number of different magazines, including, for example, Rolling Stone and Dwell. And as an outcome of that, he has an incredible level of profitability and repeat customer buying with his customer base that come to him repeatedly telling him, you know, I may not primarily think I'm going to your hotel because I love your hotel. Really, the reason I keep going to your hotel is it reinforces my perception of myself. It makes it okay for me to be me. And so the question, to bring it back to Ben's presentation, that we could ask ourselves is, what did our clients, what the triangle look like, the pyramid look like for our clients, right, in the Drupal sphere? And so if we're aiming at meeting the physiological needs of somebody, a Drupal client, would that mean the website needs to be bug-free or performant, or perhaps that it just fits the needs of the statement of the work or the requirements document? At the safety level, perhaps that safety of investment. Maybe it's the security of the website itself. Perhaps it's uptime. At the love and the belonging level, for a Drupal site to get customers there, perhaps it needs to drive traffic, or maybe it needs to build ROI or build community. Depends on the customer business case. And to get a customer, a Drupal customer, all the way to esteem, perhaps the site needs to attract recognition, or maybe it's that it needs to beat the customer's competition. And so to bring it back to what Ben was saying, to figure out what it would be for you to get your customers consistently and reliably to the self-actualization peak of this pyramid, you could start first by understanding what you're really great at. And I think that would drive you to a place where you can come up with a repeatable process, and understanding first and foremost what it would look like to get your customers to have peak experiences with your Drupal service.
So, thank you, Sam. What do you guys think of that?
Yeah, really cool.
Yeah. But I will take that. So, if you want to have the best, happiest life you can in the easiest way possible, do business with people who already like you. Figure out what they want the most. And I could say give it to them right now, but I'm not. What I'm going to say is change anything that you're doing that doesn't help them get there. Right? Because what I want you to understand is it's not doing the one thing that the customer's asking you for. It's the 49 other things around it that are so easy to tune to exactly what that customer is looking for. It takes a little bit of effort to change your messaging, to change your brand. And that's what you need to be focused on if you want customers to do business with you again and again and again. And you want to create those evangelists for your personal brand or your business brand. All right. I think Four Kitchens does a phenomenal job at this. What does Four Kitchens build?
Big website.
I should have said, for somebody who doesn't work at Four Kitchens. But they do. They build big websites. And it's not just that that's what they actually do. It's that that's what they work on in the community. That's what they're known for. That's what they say. That's the kind of people that they hire. Right? They're really, really good at standing out among developers. I chickened out. I decided to not be a developer anymore so that I could stand out as a marketer. But these guys have done a really fantastic job. What other companies in our community stand out? long as you don't say 4 kitchens, then I guess it's okay.
So chapter 3, Lullabot.
Chapter 3, Lullabot, phase 2. What is phase 2 known for?
Being partners with Acquia.
Government sites. They do massive government sites, right? What is Lullabot really good at?
Training.
Podcasts. I mean, training. But their podcast feeds is one of their lines, and they do it really, really well. And it tickles that, or it scratches that itch, right? Say that's right. Lynda.com for training. Yeah, I mean, I don't even have to go there. I know what lynda.com does. They do training. Right? There are a lot of companies that do this really, really. Apple does this particularly well, and I didn't mention Apple because I thought you were going to talk about Apple, but I'll talk about Apple now. Apple does this so well. How many of you have an Apple product? Yeah. And how many of you have more than one? On your person right this second. Yeah. Look around. It's we're laughing, but it's kind of like it's not a joke. It's like I'm in awe of what this company is able to do. So what is it that Apple's really, really, really good at?
They make cool stuff that performs well.
They make what stuff?
Cool stuff.
Cool stuff.
They make silver stuff.
Silvery stuff. That's good. Easy to use and cool. Easy to use and cool. Go ahead.
There was one of your slides went flying by that said something about you're solving an unmet need, and that's sure what they did with iPods and with iPhones.
Yep.
I mean, they innovate. Wow, I never knew I couldn't live without that until I got one.
And I think that you hit the most perfect one, which is that Apple makes it so that you can get to your stuff with click, click, there's my stuff. On their desktops, it was click, double click, there's my stuff, right? How many of you ever had an MP3 player before the iPod? Once you loaded, yeah, it would only play like 50 songs. And once you got any songs on it, you never wanted to touch it again. Because it took you hours to get it to... Right. But what was it that Apple talked about when they came out with the iPod? 1,000 songs. Where?
In your pocket.
In your pocket. Now, 1,000 songs, they could have said 1,500 songs, right? Because it could actually hold that many. But they didn't. They said 1,000. But that wasn't even the important part. The important part was in your pocket. Why was that so important? Who cares that it fits in your pocket? They all fit in your pocket. What?
You got what you wanted.
You got what you wanted, and it was in your pocket. Not a pocket. It was in your pocket. Your songs that you like, 1,000 of them, in your pocket. Right? That's what Apple's brilliant at. Click, click, I'm listening to music. Scroll wheel, and then eventually touchscreen, right? And the phone, the iPhone's the same way, right? Click, click, I got what I want. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. And every subsequent product, before and after, and when they really started to go down in the 90s, which is when I worked there, we never talked about the user experience when I worked at Apple. We never talked about that. We talked about getting the chip to run faster, getting the boxes to open faster, getting it to work on the internet. We never talked about the user experience, right? It was the brilliance of Steve Jobs, and he really understood what it was that they did best. And he aligned the outputs of the company. When you open that iPhone box, oh my goodness, it's a jewel case. It's like, I mean, when I bought my wife her engagement ring, it was not as impressive as opening the iPhone. Right? Because the experience flows through everything that they do. I'll give you a quick example from Valachi. And this is, I'm going to use this one because it's just like so far out there. You wouldn't think that this matters, but we send our customers an invoice every month. And 6 months ago, we started asking our project managers write just a couple of sentence summary of what we've accomplished for the customer this month, and put it on the bottom of the invoice. Give it to our bookkeeper, put it on the bottom of the invoice. And I'm like, what? What? I mean, I got to be honest, they're all sitting back there, and they're all laughing at me now. But that was the response. It was like, why are we doing this? This is ridiculous. I'm embarrassed to do this. But we worked them through and we rewrote them and we got them so they sounded really good. And it was just like, hey, you guys popped into the top 10 for these 3 phrases this month. Thank you so much for doing business with us. By the way, thanks to Jenny, who worked on this piece of the campaign with us this month. She's great. Jenny's their director of marketing. I changed the name. And we sent out the invoices. What do you think happened? Well, yeah, they did pay. They did pay their invoices. But we got phone calls, we got emails forwarded to us that like the accounts payables person saw this message and then copied it and emailed it out to the entire company about what Jenny had done. And she's like a little embarrassed, but you could tell she's like also kind of like, awesome. Because it made her look good. It was cool. She's doing this internet marketing thing and she did it. And whose invoice do you think they paid first? Which one's on the top of the stack? Our invoice. So it's good for us. But it made her look good. We did all the work. She looked good. That's what we do. We make marketers look good. Questions?